Welcome to the HS Awareness Virtual Summit Day 7. Today we have Jonathan Kumuteo. Am I pronouncing your name right? Because I'm bad.
Perfect. That was actually perfect.
Okay, there we go. Journalism skills coming in there. Thank you so much for joining us. Today is about storytelling. I have Jonathan here, and then I also have Angelique Andrews, who will be joining us later on at 12:35 p.m. to talk about her story. We are going to be talking about the art of storytelling. I was reading some of the responses to our survey, and there were some people who wanted to learn how to tell their stories better. And so this is going to be a taste of that through the stories of two individuals that are doing profound things in their, not only in their lives, but with hidradenitis suppurativa. So I want to introduce Jonathan, who is a professional boxer and HS patient. Jonathan is an Olympic international boxer, London ABA welterweight champion, and national ABA England champion. Recently, he began speaking out about his own experience with HS while navigating his career as a professional boxer. Welcome, Jonathan.
Hello, welcome. Good afternoon, everyone over there.
Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us more about who you are and how you got into boxing. I would love to hear that story.
Yep, so as you said, I'm a professional boxer. In fact, I just made the transition into professional boxing as I was an Olympic style boxer beforehand. And where does my boxing journey start? It started back in 2011. At the time I was age 15, a few months prior to my 16th birthday. I'm now 24 years old. And I wasn't really interested in boxing. At the time, I wasn't suffering from HS either. I was just a teenager who was highly competitive, and I always wanted to win whatever it was that I did, whether it was getting the best grades at school. But you know, one of my friends challenged me to go down to the local boxing club in London, and after a few months of teasing or back and forth between the both of us, I finally went down and I fell in love with the sport instantly. That was September 2011. I had my first fight in October 2012. I won that. I went on to have a dozen more fights before I suddenly got hit with hidradenitis, HS. And how my HS started at the beginning was simply a small lump on my right underarm. And it didn't hurt, it just wouldn't go. And to be fair, I would say that I used to shave my underarms quite frequently. That's the only thing I would say wasn't the norm. I would say maybe to the average person, because I was fit, I was healthy. I've never been drunk in my life. I don't smoke cigarettes or anything else. So I don't quite fit the criteria to be the average HS patient. However, I was affected. I went and saw my GP. I just told her, you know, I've got this lump on my underarm and it won't go. She gave me some antibiotics, and after a week or so, it started doubling in size until it was about the size of a golf ball, and it was so painful. And however, you know, being an alpha male, being strong-headed, being somebody that didn't really want to go to the hospital, I just, you know, I played it off, and I would always have my arm up, and I'll be like, I'll go to it'll eventually pop, you know, but it never did. One day I was watching films with a few mates. This was around June 2015. I suddenly felt so much pain on my right underarm. It felt as though my underarm was going to explode. And I remember getting up, walking up and down the house, and I couldn't comprehend what was going on. And it was difficult to even explain to my friends what was going on. So I just played it off, and I said, oh no, there's something. I had an arm injury I sustained in boxing, and it was just bothering me. Long story short, the next day I went to A&E, which is accident and emergency. And the doctor told me that I would have to have it drained, the abscess drained and removed. He didn't know it was HS. I didn't know it was HS for almost 2 years. So from then on, from between 2015 and 2017, I wasn't diagnosed with HS. I was just told I kept on having repeated abscesses because after the first operation, they left me with a 4 centimeter deep and wide hole in my right underarm. And I remember waking up, it was so painful. For me, that was the most painful day in my life that I can recall. You know, of course, I've probably had more painful days, but my body adapted to having HS, and I got used to being in pain so much that no pain struck me like the first time. You know, I was left with a 4 centimeter wide and deep hole, which had to recover from the inside out. And I had to visit my local hospital every day for the first 4 weeks to have my to have the dressings packed and unpacked, as I needed to recover from the inside out. They wouldn't close the wound. I recovered reasonably quick. I was young, fit and healthy. I was back in the boxing gym within 6 weeks. However, the skin on my underarm kept on tearing every now and then. It could be random. I could be in the shower. I could wake up in the middle of the night and my top is bleeding. You know, it could swell up again and I'll be in pain. And I went back to the nurses and they kept on telling me, oh, don't worry, you know, eventually it would close. And it was a tiny hole at the time, you know, probably smaller than my fingernail even. And I got on with life. I moved on. Fast forward to 2016. I remember it was around June as well. I was training for the national championships. And this time I started to feel swelling in both my underarms. And in the back of my mind, I knew what it was, as in, I didn't know it was HS, but I knew it was that illness I was suffering from. It hadn't completely gone. However, you know, I kept on training, I persevered, I pushed through it. You know, there was times when I could just be chilling, hanging out, and there's clear fluid leaking from my underarms, or yellow pus, or blood. And, you know, I still trained. I managed to box in the national championships and I won the London championships in October 2016, suffering from HS. And I was at the time taking 8 antibiotics a day. So 2 different antibiotics, which my doctor had put me on for about a year at least. And they kept on putting me on slightly different antibiotics. But the antibiotics that I was using at the time was something called, I don't know if you guys have the same names in America, but I've got one here. It looks just like this. And these are what you call rifabutin tablets. And I had to take 150 meg. And I had to take 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon of this one. And then I had to take another antibiotic. Hold on, I've got them here. Here's another version of this is another one, which was Rifidin. And it was another 150 meg tablet. Had to take 2 twice a day. So in combination, that was 8 tablets a day. And the rifabutin, I believe it's called, is so strong that patients with TB, HIV and AIDS take it. So it was very difficult to train. You know, there was times when it would upset my stomach. There was times when it just messed me up in my stomach, you know, messed up my digestion. You know, ever since then, to be fair, it takes me quite a long time to digest food. You know, maybe it's due to the fact that I was on a medication for so long. I took that for over 2 years straight. There was only times when I just didn't feel like taking medication. I'll probably stop for about to 4 weeks at the most. But if I stop for more than a month, what would happen is I'd feel this sensation in my underarms, and it wasn't a nice sensation whatsoever. It was more of a, you're about to start feeling pain. You're about to start feeling ill. And it was a discomfort. And since I started training for the championships in 2016, I had to wear dressings on both underarms because the HS would ruin all my clothes, you know, all my t-shirts, and I wore dressings so much that I became uncomfortable when I didn't. You know, there could be that little 30-minute exchange from when I'm out of the bathroom and I'm preparing to put my clothes on. Even that felt uncomfortable. And, you know, but I held it down. At the time, there was no answers. The doctors couldn't tell me what it was. And my dermatologist, they didn't know. They just told me I kept on getting repeated abscesses and to stay on the medication, which did work because it maintained it. And luckily for me, my HS was very defined in the areas. And at the time, it was just in both underarms. It got worse, but I'll get to that in a moment. So 2016 happened. I won the London Championships, taking 8 tablets a day, got to the national semis. I lost to the eventual winner who beat an opponent that I had already beaten before. And my coach told me, Jonathan, you should rest for 2 weeks. And I said, okay. As I was resting, coming to the second week, I started to feel weak, literally. And that was the difference between the beginning of HS and I would say falling severe with HS, or it going into stage 3 at this point. And I was so weak, I couldn't get out of bed. I was just in pain. And at this point, I was getting abscesses in my groin area as well. But at the time, it was maybe 1 or 2. But it was so painful that I couldn't go running. I couldn't do a star jump. And it kind of put my body in shock because when you move a certain type of way, it will just be too painful to bear. I'm sure a few of you guys can relate. And I was bedbound. It made me very upset because, you know, no less than 8 weeks prior to that, I just won the London Championships. Now I can't get out of bed. Now my HS has spread to both my underarms. I'm now starting to feel it in my groin area. And, you know, at that point, I still didn't know what was wrong. You know, I had tried and they had put me on so many different medications, you know, but I still persevered. I still trained. And for me, why I was able to do so was, I remember one day reading about an athlete who suffered from TB, and she had to take a shot to a jab to the stomach of, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know how to pronounce it, it's Humira.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I believe HS patients also take that, or it's an option.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when I read that, for me, it was, in a sense, life-changing because I realized that there were people out there going through what I was going through and taking those circumstances or those situations and winning with them. So for me, I stopped complaining. However, I can't say everybody should be the same. You know, I was strong-minded, I was young, and I also didn't know what was wrong with me, if you understand where I'm coming from. I was in denial of whatever it was. And, you know, for some reason, I just had the strength because there was times when I couldn't get out of bed. So many times. There was times when I just thought I'd never feel better. There was times when my doctors are telling me they don't know what's wrong with me and I'm just giving up and I'm just upset. Family members can't understand. Close friends can't understand. You know, you're embarrassed and it's almost like an invisible disease because, you know, you could be out in public. No one could physically see, oh, you know, you're ill. And then having to explain to my coaches, having to explain to friends, family, some days when I suddenly can't get out of bed and I'm like, guys, just go. And, you know, that was difficult because even those around me, they just didn't comprehend. They didn't, as much as I tried to explain it to them, they thought maybe I was unhygienic. They thought maybe it was because I was shaving my underarms all the time, amongst many other things. I remember friends would even say, oh, like, it's because you're dirty, or it's because you're not showering correctly. And I'm somebody that looks after my hygiene very, very much. But as we all know, HS, those aren't the reasons as to why people suffer from HS. So fast forward to January 2017, I remember on New Year's, a few days prior, I couldn't get out of bed, and I saw everyone enjoying themselves, and I was so upset because I just felt as though my purpose in life, which was to become a professional fighter, was taken from me. And I remember asking myself, God, why me? Why me? I'm feeling pain in both my underarms, even in my groin area. I keep bleeding all the time. I've been wearing dressings for 2 years. Like, how am I gonna overcome this? Fast forward 8 months now. This time round, my second operation, in fact, I'll go back to January, sorry. January 2017, I had my second operation. They removed the abscesses in both my underarms, but they didn't touch my groin area. And that was due to the fact that I didn't quite tell the doctors that I was suffering from HS in that area. I just thought it would go, and it wasn't that bad. It would come and go, but when it did come, it was very painful. I couldn't move. It's almost like you could be walking, and then you make one false movement, or you make one step in a certain way, and it hits you, and it makes you want to jump in public, but you can't, because you have to compose yourself. No one around is gonna understand like what's going on. So I was bedbound for 8 months this time. I was ill. I was weak. I was depressed. I just felt as though I would never overcome it. And that for me hurt so much, because at the time, I still didn't know what was wrong with me. I was searching the internet. HS wouldn't even come up as one of the options. And I just felt so alone, felt so lonely. However, I overcame it a little bit in the terms of I recovered, but the skin on my underarms would still tear open. They would still swell up. So the operation, neither the first or the second operation was successful. And this time, my underarms had become so lumpy because of the way in which the tissue grew back. And I returned to boxing. And in fact, before I returned to boxing, when my doctor gave me the green light, she said, go down to the weights gym and work out. And I remember I couldn't even lift the bench press, the bench bar, and the assisted one as well. I literally couldn't do 10 reps. And that for me was very, very painful, because as a youngster, I'd always been very active. And even before I ever made my first visit to the gym, I could rep more than 10. And this time around, I just couldn't. But, I tried. However, it was a very low point in my life, because there was no one that I could lean to try to understand what I was going through. But God gave me strength. I went back to boxing. I competed in my last championships in April 2018, and I lost in the London finals against an opponent I had previously beaten as well. And I said, you know what? I'm going to use this time here to chase up my dermatologist and find out what can be sorted out, because at this point, I had been diagnosed with HS, and it just didn't make sense. It didn't make sense. But how I knew it was definitely HS was the tracks that the HS kept on creating beneath the abscesses. And that to me was something I just didn't understand, because when the abscesses would go, it would create a track. And I couldn't literally explain what a track was to anybody, and the way in which I dealt with my HS, to be fair, was I would put gauze I'd put quite a few layers of gauze, about this much. And then I would put a dressing over it, a huge dressing. I think it's 10 by 15 centimeters. And then I would wear a top all the time. I would never wear anything tight. I would always wear almost like a thermal, which wasn't too tight, but also wasn't too loose. And that was me 24/7. And that kind of helped. And in my groin area, I would put gauze. And then I would just wear underwear in a way, the type of underwear where the gauze wouldn't move too much because it would affect me in between my creases. That kind of worked to an extent. And at night, I would literally fold a pillow in half and put it under my underarms, both underarms. And sometimes I'd sleep on my stomach. So I'd put a pillow on my stomach so I'm not leaning on my underarms too much, or my groin area. And that kind of, helped me get to sleep. Because at first, there was nights when I just couldn't sleep. I was in too much pain. And I had taken codidromol, cocodamol alongside my antibiotics. And sometimes even that wasn't enough, because you just want to be able to get to sleep sometimes. And you can't sleep until suddenly you wake up, you're like, damn, how long was I asleep for? 2 hours? But that's my HS story. But you know what? I'll finish the HS story on this part here, which is where it kind of ends for me. So April 2018, I had my last fight I lost. And then I spent those months chasing up my dermatologist for an answer, for an alternative, because the medication was just maintaining it. It wasn't helping it. And September 2018, she gave me 3 options, my dermatologist. She said, either you go on a medication called Roaccutane for up to 6 months. Are you familiar with Roaccutane?
No, I've never heard of it.
Yeah, so Roaccutane, I believe is how you kind of, I think ROAC, I don't know how to spell it, but Roaccutane is a medication that is the strongest medication for acne. And what it does, it dries out your sweat glands completely and your pores. And as you know, HS can affect your sweat glands, as it blocks your sweat glands and the pores. And however, she said that it would have a very negative effect on my mental well-being. And she said that a lot of people have suicidal thoughts when they go on that medication for a long time. And the other option was to take the Humira shot to my stomach, I think once every week for however long I need to. And then the third option was to have, so in America it's called Accutane. The third option was to have a skin graft operation where they would literally remove the sweat glands on my underarms. And I said, okay. I went and saw the surgeon, and I'm a person who I like to crack a lot of jokes, and she made me very comfortable. We were joking around, and she said that I could have the skin graft operation that will take skin from my thighs or my bum and literally remove my sweat glands in my underarms and remove any tissue or damaged skin on any other areas of my body, which would have been my groin area as well. And I accepted. She asked me whether I wanted to do it one body part at a time. I said no. I wanted it to get done, hit my whole body in one go so that I could recover as soon as possible and hopefully return to boxing. But she did say it was a 50-50 operation. It wasn't guaranteed to relieve me of HS at all. Nonetheless, I had the operation and I was recovered within 10 weeks. It was it was a miracle, It was, this time round, I mean, it was very difficult, but I kind of prepared myself mentally since the beginning of the year. I had operation on November 8th, 2018, 3 days after my 23rd birthday, and I haven't needed to take any medication since. I haven't had any flare-ups. The skin on my underarms is reasonably recovered. It's not the same. I could actually show you. I don't mind showing you. And the skin on they took the skin from my bottom, pardon? Can you hear me?
If you want to.
Yeah, I can show you. I'll show you in a moment.
Okay.
So yeah, so they took the skin from my bottom, and instead of my thigh or my leg, because my surgeon told me that there was a possibility that the skin pigment would be pink or wouldn't return to my skin color. So, you know, in hindsight, me thinking, oh, in boxing we get on the scales, and on the weigh-in before the fight, and I didn't want it to be visible, so I chose my bottom. That was a bad mistake, a wrong decision, because I couldn't move for 10 weeks. I literally couldn't move. I couldn't even go to the toilet. I had to save going to the toilet once a week, because if you move too much, your body will go in shock and the ambulance will literally have to get you. So I spent the first 2 weeks in the hospital. I was on the medication they give you there, so it was all right. But I was so weak after this operation that I couldn't hold my phone and type with the same finger, with the same hand. But and I couldn't wash my face for about 2 weeks. My mother, I had to move back to my mom's house, and she had to wash me for about nearly 2 months, because I didn't have the strength, and I didn't have the movement in my underarms to even wash myself. But like I said, I recovered within 10 weeks. I was back in the gym February 9th. So I had the operation November 8th, back in the gym February 9th. And even though I lost a little bit of strength, I was sluggish, etc., I felt the best I had felt since before having HS, and that was way back in 2015. So I would say it definitely worked. I haven't needed to take any medication since. Zero flare-ups. And yeah, the skin graft worked. Do you have any questions? And I'm going to put my phone down for 30 seconds to take off my shirt so I can show you.
If anybody has any questions, this was a great story, because I was talking to Jonathan beforehand about how usually there's this there's sort of like a type A of patients. Different factors go into possibly having HS, and so him being a very relatively healthy individual, fit and everything like that, and not saying that people who are unfit have HS. That's not what I'm saying, but I thought that it was interesting that he was a boxer, and he was a professional. Not something that I've seen very often. And so when I saw his story online, I thought it was amazing, because he had gotten a surgery. And it's important to see and know that there are HS patients who are out here creating sort of like who are still active even while they're dealing with this condition, because sometimes we can be typecast as like being bedridden, or not being able to move, period. And I know that is some people's experiences. However, the other side of the spectrum is individuals who might have stage 3, but are still out there trying to find some normalcy in their lives. And everybody's going to handle HS differently, just because of the support system that they have, their own mental capacity, the resources they have to heal and to get treatment, diagnosis. All those things play into whether you can move forward in your life. So I believe that Jonathan, myself, and other individuals who are able to go out there and still work are very privileged. I want people to have examples of individuals who have found a way to live their lives and also manage and treat HS. it's important to see that because you can do it too. It might be very difficult for you to do it, and you might have to jump through a lot of hurdles. It might hurt. However, on the other side of that is a lot of freedom. On the other side of that is a lot of joy. Even if there isn't a cure, you can still manage your life again. So I don't want you to get discouraged, and that's why I have Jonathan here and Angelique coming on soon so that they can talk, so you all can get examples of how you can live a normal life. So I'm gonna let Jonathan go ahead and show us his scars because I know that we were talking about surgical options. Some of you have seen the scars that I have from CO2. Jonathan has his from skin grafting. So you can go ahead.
Okay, so can you guys see clearly?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this is my left underarm. That's what it looks like. And I have no restricted movement whatsoever.
That's great.
And this is my right underarm, the original underarm.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite caved in a little bit, but other than that, no restricted movement whatsoever. The skin is quite dark, but my surgeon said it will take maybe up to 2 years or so for it to get a little bit lighter. It wouldn't quite be the same as obviously the skin is from my bottom, but I would just say that since the operation, I don't sweat anymore. I only pretty much sweat from my head and my private areas a little bit. And I also didn't include that I had, I don't know if I did, I also had an operation in my groin area as my HS also affected my scrotum. I'm sure you will know what that is. And that was the most difficult part of all of this.
Yeah.
And that was the reason why I forgot to mention that, because that's not really something that I've gone public quite yet with. It's for me, that's still difficult, and it's still a difficult chapter to kind of look back on. But I think it's important to include that because that was the worst for me. That was the main reasons as to why many days I couldn't get out of bed, because when it affected me that area, oh my God, it was the worst. But like I said, the operation worked and they had to cut literally the whole left side of it and stitch the skin together. The stitches did fall out and that was horrendous. And it took about 3 months to recover there. Was it 3 months? Just under 3 months, 2.5 months to recover there. And that was the reason why I was bedbound and I couldn't move. However, when it came to my upper body, my underarms, I never really felt any pain after this operation. It was numb. And to be fair, in my when I feel this area, it's still I would say the senses are still turning, the nerves are still kind of asleep. And when I feel my back in that area, it feels like I'm feeling myself through a t-shirt. So I'd say the sensitivity isn't quite the same as it was before. But like I said, the operation was successful. I haven't had any flare-ups since. Same goes for my groin area. That was more difficult because the skin took a long time to migrate together. But yeah, it worked. It's possible. And I know that everybody deals with pain and HS differently. But I guess I was blessed and I was lucky because I've seen on the internet some people's HS affecting them all over their body and on their face, etc. And luckily for me, even though I would say it was stage 3, it was very defined in those areas. Maybe due to the fact that I was on the heavy medication that TB, HIV, and AIDS patients take, so maybe that helped contain it. And the other factors that I did for kind of which helped me bear with the pain was, layering a few pieces of gauze together and then putting a dressing on and then putting a nice, comfortable, loose t-shirt on. Even when I'm putting gauze in my groin area, just so that it's that much more comfortable. Folding pillows in half when I go to sleep. Pretty much sleeping with 6+ pillows in the bed. And those few things kind of helped me deal with HS at times when there was no other options. And also, I would clean the wounds with saline solution, which is just a clear liquid that you can get from the doctors. That helped as well, because I felt as though when they use soap in those areas, it would give me flare-ups. Anything with chemicals would flare up, and as you know, HS can be very odorous. So the saline, alongside cleaning the saline with gauze, definitely helped. And I don't know anything else right now. If you have any more questions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's enlightening to see the differences in treatment and surgery between where you live in London and America, because I know treatments vary differently, and I know that in Europe, some treatments seem to be more advanced than American treatments, because it seems like you all are a little bit more ahead, just with as far as like research and just innovation with surgeries. I don't know if do you find that to be true in your space? Like, was it easier for you to get access to surgery and treatment?
I would like to actually disagree with you.
Okay.
But we definitely, our health system is definitely different, and our module is based on what we call the NHS, and technically it's free.
Okay.
But it being free means that you have to wait maybe several years, and that's what the doctors do. They kind of palm you off, and they tell you, oh, don't worry, oh, there's nothing we can do. But you have to be persistent, and you have to keep. For me, I had to keep going to my doctors and telling them that I can't do this. I had to even exaggerate the pain at times just so that I can get the appointment, because they don't want to give you the appointments.
Yeah.
And I had to go and do my own research. Many doctors never even knew what HS was. I feel as though if the doctor who I had the first operation with knew what it was, I may have never had to have 3 operations.
Mm-hmm.
And also the skin graft. I mean, I did see a specialist, but from what I've read and from the people that have reached out to me, the skin graft option isn't really an option that most people take.
Yeah.
I did see that in America, they do something slightly different where, I forgot what it's called, where they stretch the skin and then they remove the damaged tissue, but they stretch the skin and then stitch that closed. Whereas I had my underarms completely removed to a point where now I don't sweat anymore. So, but in all honesty, I believe that there's definitely more information in America, because that's where I got most of my information from, on the internet. However, I heard your health system isn't the greatest.
I'm glad that
Or
you.
it's expensive.
I wasn't aware, and that's interesting because we're fighting for universal health care here, and people have talked about the difficulties of that and the wait times with that. So I appreciate that perspective, and you educating me and educating all of us on what you've had to go through with the healthcare system in your space. That's enlightening. I appreciate that.
No, you're welcome. Yeah, thank you for having me on. This is something that, for me, usually, like, I'm a very talkative person, but this whole HS topic for me is something that I haven't really even given myself time to truly sit down and reflect on my journey.
Yeah.
Something that I've definitely been brushing under the carpet for a long time, and maybe something that I'm still not ready to go back and touch on that journey or that part of my life. And you know, I am one of the few that are lucky to say that they are relieved of HS. But I've also read and heard that there are others who were relieved of HS for many years and then it returned. And I hope I'm not one of those, but I'm quite confident due to the fact that I no longer have sweat glands. So, and my HS was very defined to those areas. So I hope it doesn't return. But I'm always on social media. If anyone has any questions, they can always reach out to me or reach out to you, and you can reach out to me and ask me if there's anything that I could do, if there's any more seminars I could partake in, I would be more than happy to. If there's any ways in which you would suggest me to, in a sense, create awareness for HS, because I'm lucky to be in a position where I have a good PR and I'm now professional boxer signed to one of the premier promoters and networks in the UK, BT Sport, which is in partnership with ESPN in America. So I definitely have a platform, but you know, it's still raw. And if there's anything I could do for the cause, don't be afraid to get in touch. I'm not the best with responses on Instagram, so if anyone messages me, your best bet is probably to email me, which on info@jkboxing.com, or to get in touch with you and you get in touch with me, and I can do what I can to try and help the cause or help create more awareness, because, you know, I read that HS, only 0.4% of the world population is affected by HS. And I remember when I told my surgeon, it took me 2 years to get diagnosed, and she said the average person takes them 6 years. And you know, there's many people out there with HS and they don't even know what it is, and they could be taking the wrong medication, they could be dealing with it in a way in which could be a little bit more difficult than it needs to be, like myself for the first few years. And if there's anything I can do, please do let me know.
Absolutely. We really appreciate you. Can you let them know really quickly where they can follow you on Instagram so that they can contact you?
Yep, so my Instagram is @jkboxing.com, one word. And my email is info@jkboxing.com, or you can reach me through management@jkboxing.com. Or if you can't get through to me for whatever reason, please get in touch with you. And you can always get in touch with me, and I'll make sure that we connect and stay in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you and your vulnerability, for educating us on your experience. This has been very enlightening, and we really look forward to staying connected with you in the future. And I really am so glad that you are living a better life than you were before, because that's very rare well for HS patients. So I hope that you continue to have success with your body, and that you can get back to some sort of normalcy, you know, for yourself. So I really appreciate it. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Next, we're gonna have Angelique Andrews, who is gonna come on and speak. I am
able to remove me so I can just be a participant or spectator.
one moment. There we go. We have Angelique Andrews on, who is going to be speaking and talking about her experience with HS. Hi, how are you?
I'm great today. How are you, Ivana?
Doing great. So Dr. Angelique Andrews is an industrial and organizational psychologist who researched the feasibility of coaching psychology via virtual-based platforms and its application with professional coaching practice. Her passion for this work and her vision for the company comes from her 30-year personal lifelong journey with HS, which has also inspired her to launch Wellness Consultants, a Atlanta, LLC. The wellness consultation method used to support the HS clients is a research-based model integrated with real-life experience and treatment. Dr. Andrews practices a holistic coaching approach via voice call, Zoom, FaceTime, Google Duo, or Skype. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you for volunteering to tell your story, because when you emailed me, I was looking for another patient who would be willing to talk about their experience, and I really appreciate you for reaching out and putting yourself, or volunteering to put yourself on this platform. So welcome. I would love to start off by you just telling us a little bit more about who you are and what you do, and then getting into sort of your experience with HS.
Well, I just want to say thank you for being a champion for this cause, and putting on this virtual summit so that we could all come into this space and really share our experiences and promote awareness. And when I saw this, I just thought it was just phenomenal, and I'm happy to volunteer. So I've been in the behavioral health, public health profession for about 25 years now. I was approached by my dermatologist to actually create a coaching service for HS patients. And I was like, absolutely, I've had HS for over 30 years, and who could better, navigate and manage HS for, your patients than I could. And plus, being I was a psychologist, I was able to do that in the capacity of a macro level. I worked for the Marine Corps for about 5 years, and I worked on their behavioral health suicide prevention programs to help mitigate suicide prevention for about 15,000 Marines and sailors. So I was able to kind of really adapt those programs to kind of help prevent those things. So it was a really good place in my life that I really enjoyed being in and doing that. So Wellness Consultants of Atlanta, for the most part, we provide an assessment. And what that assessment does is identify the most critical factors of your HS care. We act as an integration to your medical care team. So you have your dermatologist, your PCP, your plastic surgeon, your clinical psychologist. We act as a coach, a life coach, to kind of help give you those tangible results. And we implement that through that wellness plan through coaching. And it's we pride ourselves on our 3 Ps, which it's private one-to-one counseling, so you don't have to share in a group. It's personalized. So like I said, we have the assessment that identifies your critical factors and implement that within the coaching space. And it's professional. So it's something that I've done for years. So that's, it's new. And so I'm very excited about giving this service to other HS patients.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And what has your experience been with HS? You've been dealing with it for 30 years. When did it first start, and where are you now?
So I like to make the connection with 3 variables with HS. So genetically, my father, my uncle, my sister have all had HS. Listening to the young man before I spoke, he mentioned that he had HS in his scrotum area. My father did as well. That was something that I didn't learn until after he had passed away, and my mom had shared that with me. My uncle had HS severely on his neck. My sister had it on her nose. So I think that it is definitely something that I had genetically, but I want to make the connection that my childhood experiences, my trauma, I believe, and my obesity were also variables and triggers that help to manifest the HS in my body, because of the trauma and the stress and holding on to that, I think was really what made it more severe. So, I experienced sexual, mental, physical trauma from the age of 3 to about 7. My victimizer lived with us for about 10 years before he moved on to being in the military. So that trauma, I feel like, set me up for, you know, that cumulative stress over the years. And then about when I was 7 years old, I was like a bully. So I kind of mimicked the things that were going on in my life. So I kind of had my own little torture chamber going on. So I was really undergoing a whole lot of stress. By the time I was 10 or 11, I started to see my first signs of HS in my groin area. But I didn't know what those were, and I didn't know how to bring that to the attention of my mother or my parents. They would come up, they would erupt, and then they would go away. And those were the milder cases. As I got into my teen years, at about, let's say about 12 years old, I weighed about 235 pounds. And that was the heaviest I had ever been. I've always been a kind of a thick, chunky little kid, but at 12 years old, at 235 pounds, that was the heaviest I'd ever been. And the reason why I feel like I was so heavy genetically is because I emotionally ate. My victimizer could not stand obese people, and I felt that looking back, and as I had my counseling, that was something that I used to kind of protect myself by putting on that weight so I would not be abused anymore. But what it did was cause another issue within, you know, the teen adolescent years, where you're now, everyone's looking at themselves, judging and trying to see, you know, comparing themselves to others. And I lived in a predominantly white area. So, you know, between being called fat and the N-word and, you know, all those other kinds of things, it was very traumatic for me. At about 17, I got into a very bad assault with a grown man, a white man, where I was physically assaulted in a yard, thrown around. It was terrible. So as you can see, I'm just kind of getting trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. At that time, I started to get lumps under my arms the size of golf balls at that time. And this is where I'm making the connection, the trauma and the HS being triggered and the obesity. So at that time, my sister was beginning to get nodules on her nose, and we thought it was just acne, but come to find out later, after my father and my uncle had gone to a dermatologist in Atlanta that specialized in, you know, black skin, black hair, we were able to find out that it was HS. So as I began to, and in between that, when I was about 14 and 15, I was sexually assaulted about 3 times. So I'm accumulating all this trauma, and things are starting to show up in my body in terms of HS. So I've got I've got lumps showing up in my private area, and I've got golf ball size lumps showing up under my axilla on both sides. And I'm continuing to amass trauma. So about 17, 18, it started to kind of calm down a bit. But then at that time, I started to have seek counseling. And when I would talk about the things that had happened to me, when I would visit with my counselor, I would have a flare-up, a major flare-up, to the point where it would get inflamed and pussy, and I'd have to go to the emergency room to have it lanced, which was another, at that time, we're talking about in the 90s, getting things lanced in the South, in the emergency room as a Black woman. They think that, you know, the perception that I perceived of those medical professionals were that, you know, I was dirty. And it was really humiliating, because when they would lance it, then the odor from the pus would come out. And that was more trauma for me. It was more trauma. So as I would seek more counseling, do more, have more flashbacks, try to deal with my mental health condition, my HS would progress. When I went away to college, it was still there, but it seemed to be a little bit more managed. I had a good support system. I had a boyfriend who's now my husband, who's amazing, who helped to, he wasn't really freaked out about it. He would, I'd say, oh, that's just a little lump. And he didn't really pay attention to it. So during the time when I was with him, my flares were kind of manageable. And also, I forgot to mention, from the ages of 14 to about 21, I was a smoker. So that, I hear with HS patients, is also something that's like a driving variable that causes that HS trigger. So I had the perfect storm. That's what I tell everybody. I had the perfect storm. I had so many variables that helped to, manifest this disease within my body. After I was married to my husband, I opened up a store. And at that time, it was extremely stressful. It was a bookstore. And I had a pilonidal cyst. I don't know if you've ever had heard of those. So I had a pilonidal cyst. And it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. The pain was excruciating. I had to go to a urologist. No, I can't remember the type of doctor, but he was able to relieve that for me. And it was associated with my HS. And so I had that happen, had to pack it out. My husband actually packed that for me. And then later, I had received surgery under my left axilla. Now, I went to this particular general surgeon because my PCP referred him to me, but he did not know anything about HS. And when I went under the surgery with him, and this is about in the early 2000s, he didn't know what he was doing. He wasn't very familiar with HS. So I was left with like a 12-inch scar from here to here under my axilla. And that entire area came back with a vengeance of HS. I'm still dealing with that to this day. So my story is dealing with a lot of surgeons who didn't really know what HS was, what it looked like, and then how to really treat it and get rid of it. When I became pregnant with our children, my HS became more prevalent. I thought that I was miscarrying our son, which is our first child, and it was just a ruptured HS boil that was in that area. So needless to say, I was relieved, but at the same time, the HS was just really complicating my pregnancy, both pregnancies. And I know what I've learned since, that it's the hormones that make it more prevalent. And then I think the worst part of my HS happened. I managed my stress pretty well during my PhD dissertation writing stages, but I had terrible flare-ups under my arms and in my groin area always. And so that was usually managed with the typical antibiotics, the topical creams, the Kenalog injections, the topical creams, the Kenalog injections, and eventually surgery. Now, at this time, my sister had, as I said, she had HS, but she had Hurley stage 1. And what happened with her, they gave her Accutane. And she took Accutane for like 6 to 8 months, maybe almost a year. But what happened with her is that her HS never advanced beyond Hurley stage 1. And my dermatologist at the time was like, do you want to get on Accutane? And I was like, no, because my husband and I were still trying to determine if we were going to have another baby. And to this day, I was like, I wish I would have did it, because I feel that that particular medication at that stage may have, managed my HS so that it wouldn't have progressed. Right now, I'm at Hurley stage 3, which is the most severe. And I arrived at Hurley stage 3 within the last 5 years of my life. We had gone abroad. We went to live in Japan, in Okinawa, Japan. That's where I started working for the military, for the Department of Defense. And as you know, Okinawa is an island, and in that island is very humid. It's tropical, and it's probably the worst environmental condition that a person with HS could possibly be in. And that's where my HS became the most advanced and into the early stage 3. I went to the Naval Hospital to kind of get some understanding about what they could provide me, and it wasn't very much. I went to a surgeon who was kind of starting out. The naval surgeons are kind of new at practicing, and so they're willing to kind of experiment. So I guess I was experimented on, and I saw a particular physician that said that she could excise the diseased area within my groin. So I had the HS had worsened to early stage 3 on my mons pubis, my labia, the inside of my thighs. And we were just going to start there because the axilla was just as inflamed and aggravated as the other areas. One of the things that happened as I went under surgery at the Naval Hospital was the surgeon, I overheard talking to another surgeon asking for specific supplies, and she's like, yeah, I really want to use this for this particular surgery because, by the way, I'm just winging it. And she says this in front of me, and I'm already under anesthesia, but if I wasn't, I feel like I would have got off that table right then and there. So needless to say, she was winging it. When I got home with everything that I needed, my husband was able to start the care at post-surgery with me. And it took everything he had to maintain his composure, because I had probably 4 areas of 6 to 7 inch cuts on my body, which were not stitched up or stapled. The idea was that they were going to allow the skin to grow up from the inside out, or the inside upward, to kind of give it new skin. And that's usually how that was the new technique that they were doing. This was like in 2015. But it was the most challenging 6 months of my life. Plus, I still had to go to work and report to work because I worked for a command. So you're like a command asset. So you're pretty much like in the military. So I had to go to work for that. But it took about 6 months for that. I couldn't urinate normally. This is embarrassing, but I had to take a cup to urinate in just because the area was so, raw. And I just had to find alternative creative ways to not infect the area. But unfortunately, the surgeon didn't know about HS, didn't know how to excise the skin and the disease. And unfortunately, she left the infection on the peripheral areas of the area of the surgical areas, and it grew back in to my mons pubis. Fortunately, it did not return in my left thigh, but it did return in my right thigh, and I'm still dealing with this. So needless to say, that was a major surgery, and it didn't provide me any relief. Now, at this point in Okinawa, I had begun to see more areas of my body to get flares, and that became the most severe diseased area that I've had, which is, it prevented me from sitting down. I woke up daily in pain. I could barely get to work. I was drained, I was fatigued, I cried all the time. And I was miles and miles away from home. Eventually, I was able to go on leave that would allow me to go back to the States and begin getting infusions to help to manage the HS. So I had to fly back to the United States like every 6 to 7 months to get this done, and then fly back. So it was becoming very cumbersome to manage my HS out of the country. And so my husband and I decided that it was probably the best thing to come back. And then there were some other factors that led us to return from Okinawa, which my father had cancer, and it was very stressful. So as you can see, this trauma is definitely accumulating in my life, stress, the triggers, and, you know, obesity. Now I want to say, I feel like I didn't really address the obesity that much. As I was growing up, like I said, I was very heavy. I've lost over 100 pounds several times. And each time, you know, I couldn't keep it off, but the recommendation from my dermatologist was always, you're too big, you've got a BMI of a 40, you've got to lose weight. And I would lose the weight. I lose like 100 pounds. Like I said, when I was in Okinawa, I lost like 100 some odd pounds, but it didn't stop. It didn't stop the advancing of this disease. But I felt that the stress of the obesity helped to, you know, make it more severe. So, you know, those are some of the things that I feel that have made it the most severe. So eventually we returned back to the United States. I went to North Carolina, and started seeing a doctor at UNC. Dr. Syed at UNC Chapel Hill is amazing. Dr. Hamzavi referenced him in your last session during the week, and I was like, yes, he's amazing. He's a wonderful doctor, and he was able to help me to get things under control. And he also got me to a wonderful surgeon, Dr. Carr at UNC, who did plastic surgery, and she removed one of the largest diseased areas on the right side of my thigh just in this last, it's been about a year now, in July, to help me to manage my HS. So I can tell you that Dr. Carr, she's specialized in HS removal of diseased tissue, and she's amazing. And you know, I'm in Atlanta now, and the only reason that I'm back here is because my husband got a job and we relocated. So I was able to kind of reestablish the networks and connections in the medical team that I had in Atlanta when I got back to Atlanta. Now, in Atlanta, when I returned here, I had to get everyone moved over here from North Carolina to Atlanta, which was very stressful for me. It was so stressful. And my HS flared all over. I was draining all the time. I never wear white clothes. Everything I wear is black. I bleed through everything. The bed, seats, at work, I had to be very careful that I wasn't leaving, you know, any, you know, things on the chairs. So my life was just always around HS. Everything was about HS, you know, with my kids, my mom, my husband, everything was just HS focused. So moving back to Atlanta, having that stressful period, getting here, I hadn't realized that I had formed a really bad infection. What really indicated that the infection was so bad was the pain. I could not, I mean, my pain was like a 10 every day for about 6 months. And just recently, in the last 30 days, I was able to get back to my healthcare team, my infectious disease care team, and they were able to start me on infusions, of which I've been undergoing for the last 30 days. Now, I wish I could say that this was a successful HS story, that I'm in remission, and that, you know, things are, you know, looking up and rainbows. But my HS has been ongoing for years. I've tried every treatment. I've probably, except for CO2 laser. Now that's something that I would like to do, but haven't found anyone yet. But the things that have really challenged me with HS are the mental health issues. I don't guess that people really understand, well, in your family, the pain that you undergo every day and how that can really cause you to become just so debilitated and depressed. And it's really hard. So that was something that I really had to fight. Working out helped me to fight that, to combat that. But HS really challenges you in your mental capacity. And I have another live lived experience that I want to share with everyone before I wrap up. So for the 30 years that I've had this HS, I was embarrassed by it. I was humiliated. I never told anyone. Within my family, my children, and my husband, we kept it a family secret. No one knew about it. They always thought that I was just having some surgery or I was just sick or something like that. But when I worked for the military, I, like I said, was a suicide prevention professional. And one of the things that I did was data analysis and look at cases of people who died by suicide. And there was one particular person who died by suicide that when I began to look at the case and look at the data, I saw that this particular person had just had axilla removal of the skin for HS. I was floored. I did not know that this person had HS. Nobody knew. Obviously, it's their medical record. But when I found out about it and found out that he had had, you know, surgery under his arm, and that this person was living in the barracks, and that there was, you know, he had no family. He, you know, military life is very stressful, and that he died by suicide, I was just crushed. You know, I could just see the scene playing out in my mind, you know, because I know what it's like to go through that kind of surgery, but to not have anybody to help you, I really felt very, very sad about that. And I feel like if maybe perhaps I would have shared more to people that I had this condition, that perhaps maybe they could have said, hey, Dr. Andrews, you know, has this condition, and, you know, maybe she can help you post-surgery, or you can get some more information from her or something. And not that I'm trying to put that type of, you know, event, take responsibility for that, but it felt like, you know, had I been a little bit more forthcoming about my situation, that I could help other people. And that changed my life. That changed the way that I look at HS. It changed the way that I share my stories, my situation. I've become more willing to help and support, because I don't ever want to go through another situation where I find out that someone died by suicide who had HS, that perhaps I could have, you know, supported or talked to, or given back in some way. And that's what made me come out of the darkness. I mean, absolutely come out of the darkness. I made a vow to myself that I would never hide this again, because I think lives are at stake. And the more support that we have, the more people that we have to look to get answers or support, and to navigate this heinous disease, the better. So
yeah. Absolutely. I really appreciate you for sharing your story. And I love that there are two parallels. We had Jonathan Kumuteo, who was a boxer and had HS, and he went through surgeries. And then we have you, who, I'm not going to say it's not a success story, because your story is a success story. You're still here and you're still fighting through this. Everybody's story is different. And what our goal is to show everyone the different spectrums of stories that are across the board that HS patients experience, so that patients don't think that they're alone. So there may be another boxer out there who has HS. There may be another psychologist or individual who had
never know
HS when they were a teen. And I think it's very important to show and to speak about that, especially for teenagers, because I remember getting HS as an adolescent, and how difficult and complicated that was. There was no guide. There was no mental health help for that. There was no support. So it's really important for us to talk about these experiences, so that people they realize that they're not alone. So I appreciate you for being so vulnerable and sharing this space and taking using your voice, because it's so important. And I'm sure you've helped a lot of patients, And as we post this on YouTube, I'm sure you'll help a lot more patients out there. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I do want to say to the rest of the attendees that are here, if you are looking to begin telling your story, for an example, the advice that I would have is I used what I studied in school to help be the catalyst for that. Angelique, she also used what she studied to be the catalyst of that through psychology. And so I was a documentary filmmaker, but I was a journalist first. And so I used that skill to bring attention to something that I didn't see many people talking about outside of the community, or very small groups of medical groups speaking about. And so this needs national coverage because I remember, I don't know if anybody on here knows a singer named Johnny Blaze, but she has about 2.1 million followers on Instagram. And so when she posted her story about HS, there were thousands of comments, hundreds of comments, I think, if not thousands, of people who went under her comments saying, "Oh my God, I thought I was alone. I thought that I didn't have that nobody else had this." And so that 0.4% that Jonathan was talking about, I talk to doctors about this all the time. A lot of people think that it's more than that. Because HS is severely underdiagnosed, it's not treated properly, and the gap of getting diagnosis can be 7 years, which is difficult. So there are probably a lot of people who are dealing with it and don't know. So a part of telling your story is using what you know and what you have at your disposal. Sometimes we put barriers in front of ourselves and we say, "Oh, I'll tell my story if I have this." And don't put limitations on that, So whether that be through painting, through art, graphic design, speaking, poetry, filmmaking, singing, being a musician, whatever you can think, even if it doesn't have to do with the arts, even if you're business savvy and you want to start a business to address specific concerns with HS community. If you're a physician and you're studying to be a dermatologist, maybe you want to focus on HS or specialize a part of your work towards HS patients. All of these different things help to get your story out there and to also further help the community. So don't be afraid, even though I know it's easier said than done. Don't be afraid of your voice. Don't be afraid of your story. It's taken me a long time to get to this point of being able to say, I have HS and this is where I have it.
Yeah, exactly. For me, actually admitting that I had it in those very intimate areas and knowing that this is going on YouTube and that people that have probably known me for years will see this, it was something that was a big issue for me. And, but now that I can, they can associate that with this disease that is, we're working for a cure for, and that it's not anything that I did or, that was the wrong or dirty. It was a genetic factor. And then I had some other variables that were driving it. And I am still going to make the connection with, trauma, childhood trauma. I do a lot of research, and I've done a lot of research, and I look at the ACEs. I don't know if you've heard of the Adverse Childhood Experiences rating scale, but basically what that does is it's like 10 questions, and if you answer yes to 4 to 6 questions, you're likely to have more negative health outcomes in your adult years. And I really believe that, that early childhood trauma just kind of set the stage, the groundwork for this, hidradenitis, ACEs, for hidradenitis to kind of get in and infiltrate and get me to the severe stage that I'm at now. So I really think that, identifying the trauma, talking about the trauma, getting the help for the trauma, which I did not do for a long time. I held it in. That keeps your body in a perpetual state of stress, and you're always reliving those things. And when you have that kind of stress you're trying to manage, and with HS being a trigger, or stress being a trigger for your HS, I really believe there's a connection there. Mm-hmm. And it's affected me in my life, throughout my life.
Absolutely. And that's why getting therapy is important. That's the reason why we introduced yoga and sound bathing, meditation to this summit, because we want to provide you with ways to lower that stress,
right,
to lower that depression, so that we can create an environment within our bodies that isn't working against us. So remember, we talked about having control where we can. We can't control everything, but we can control some things. And so if we can create an environment where we can thrive and our bodies can begin trying to heal,
yes,
that means a lot while we're waiting on a cure. So I'm always going to encourage you to take your healing into your own hands while working with a professional.
Absolutely.
Mental health and dermatology, because that's what I did. I balance both of them, and I know that there are a lot of patients who do that as well. And even for the ones that don't, once again, these are examples for you to live by. I want to wrap up this session and thank you so much for tuning in. This was the last and final day. I thank you so much for joining us throughout the week. Make sure that you subscribe to our pages.
Can I give my my website so people can take a look at it and see if they'd like to have any of the coaching services that we provide?
Go ahead.
So we're at wellnessconsultantatlanta.com, or you can find me at hswellness_Atlanta on Instagram, or hswellness_ATL on Twitter. And I'm more than happy to speak with you and talk to you about our services and see if there's a way that we can kind of help manage your HS and provide you with long-lasting results, because I've been doing this for 30 years and I've got some pretty good results in terms of managing my life in HS, but still trying to work towards a cure and getting into remission. That's just something that my body's trying to work with. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
And we will see you, and make sure, like I said, following our pages, because we have more programming coming in the future, more special prizes, more connections, more resources. So we want to help build this community and spread the word. Thank you so much for participating in this summit, whether you're a patient, a caregiver, or a friend. We appreciate you. We love you. And thank you.
Blessings and shalom.
Bye.
Bye.